Stacey.
Welcome to the 917th meeting of the MSAD 27 Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Keith Yondro.
Here.
Shannon Lugden.
Here.
Abby Pooler. She will be late. Dave Susie.
Here.
Annie was in.
Here.
Gary Sibley will not be here. Sarah Ashley.
Here.
Sadie Pelletier. And Connor Pelletier.
Here. Before we begin, I just want to let everybody know we got some more thank you cards for scholarships that were awarded last year to our recent graduates. One of them, MSAD. I think she might have been coached into this. But thank you, Ms. Serwa, if you're watching, very much. Thank you for showing your gratitude. Also, another card from, or a card from Abigail Pettengill. She wanted to express her thanks to MSAD 27 as well for the scholarship. And last but not least, we have a thank you from Mr. Austin Delisle, thanking us for his scholarship as well. We good? Okay, item 2, adjustments to the agenda. Under items of business, new hires, we're going to remove item 4, Chippy Center Early Childhood Aid. And under items of business, new hires, add item number 4, FKES Ed Tech III, one-on-one. Do we help out this one? Okay, approval of meeting minutes for meeting number 915 on August 8th, 2022. Do we have a motion? Motion by moved by Shannon, seconded by. Oh, okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Tanya. Any discussion? All in favor? Approving the meeting minutes? Very good. All opposed? Approval of the meeting minutes for our special meeting number 916 on August 17th, 2022. Can I get a motion? Moved by Shannon, seconded by Sarah. Any discussion regarding that meeting minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Item 5, approval of the financial statements for July 22 and August 22. Do we have a motion to approve the financial statements for both months?
So moved.
Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Ms. Wazin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the financial statements for July and August? Motion passes. Item 6, presentation. We have student-centered coaching presentation by Ms. Kayanne Nadeau. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Is it okay to stand here?
Absolutely. That's your spot.
This is my spot. Hi. So yes, my name is Kayanne Nadeau, and I was fortunate enough to have been hired as the instructional coach for grades K through 2 last year. And so when Sharon asked me if I would be willing to present what my role was and how, what it's like for teachers to sign up for a coaching cycle, and then share with you some of the data we have collected because of those cycles, I was more than eager to share that with you. So I'm just going to go ahead and start, and if at any time you want to jump in, make a comment, ask a question, please feel free to do that. Robbie and Shannon, you can jump in too. So I thought I'd start with my why I wanted to be an instructional coach. Mr. Serwa, at the beginning of the year, spoke with us, and he said, you know, it's good to always come back to this. So I thought I'd start with why I decided to be in this role. And prior to this, I was an interventionist, and I worked with my own group of kids. And I feel like being in this role, I could go into more classrooms. I get to support my learners and see my growth with the learners. And my number 2 is I can support colleagues. Teaching is really hard, and I know since I've been a classroom teacher years ago, it's changed quite a bit. And with the impact of COVID, that puts a whole other layer on things. So anything I can do to support my colleagues, I love doing it. And it's very rewarding, just as it is teaching learners. And the third, and probably my most motivating, is I'm constantly learning and growing professionally. Go into a classroom, and it's not like I'm the expert other going in to try to change the lesson plan, but it's more of being a thinking partner and working collaboratively with them and learning constantly. And then trying to stay up to date with the research, because we know it's always constantly learning. So,
Can you just let the newer board members know what you were able to do a few years ago with the Department of Education, what we were able to provide you?
Yes, yep. So I think it was 3 years ago, the State Department reached out to Mr. Sirwa and asked if I was able to be contracted part-time to go into other schools and work as a literacy coach. And thankfully he allowed me to do that. And the yes. And that in itself was a learning curve. So one of the big, I say, positive things about being in your own school, I've already built relationships with my colleagues, and so it's much easier working collaboratively with them. And when I was working in other schools, I didn't know those teachers, they didn't know me, so there's that trust factor that wasn't there. And so that makes it more difficult to reach learners sometimes, because that's a whole process in itself. So I worked a couple years throughout mostly the county, Cal's school system in Marlstone, and I went in and did more literacy coach, not necessarily instructional, because my role now is math also. So that's where I started. So why student-centered? So as you know, COVID has had a big impact on student learning, and even though it's post-COVID right now, we are still seeing the repercussions of that. I know this year our kindergarten class, there's a number of learners who didn't go to pre-K, so our gap has really widened there. We have kids that are ready to learn and have been in classroom, know what school's like already, and then we have these other little ones that come and they haven't had any school experience, and social emotional issues. So it's definitely a need. And with this model for student-centered coaching that I'll get into a little bit in a minute, it stems from Diane Sweeney's work. So it just centers around student success. And with everything we have in place in our district, thankfully we do have a lot of support, Title I and student support services. But this is another layer to that, having a coach in a school. So this graphic just gives a little bit more information about the different approaches that can be in a school system. When coaching first started years back, it was more relationship driven. So the outer circle. Oops, I forgot I have a nice So if you take a look around here, and I know it's hard to see, but it's more about building relationships. So it's not a lot of looking at the data, and it's all about relationships more. The middle part is more teacher-centered. So this is where a coach would help with more teacher learning. Our model focuses more on student-centered, which starts with always data. So we always start actually with the learning goal, a target that teachers want to work with, and we focus on where they're at and where we want to go with them. So it's a partnership, and the sole purpose is to promote that student success. Doesn't mean that there are other layers that are embedded in it, as in other approaches, but it's definitely not evaluative in any way, and it's really focused on student learning and where to go next. student-centered coaching, when we look at coaching cycles, these are the 7 core practices that are embedded. So we start with utilizing what's called a coaching cycle, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But a full cycle generally lasts 4 to 6 weeks. It always starts with teachers' choice of a standard that they need to be working on with their kids, that they want extra help with, extra support with. From there, we unpack that standard into learning targets, and that becomes the student's success criteria, how they know that they'll be successful. And then we co-plan and we co-teach, and we use that student evidence as a right up front and center, because without that, it loses more of the student-centered approach. We always go to the student needs. And we co-teach with effective practices, and then we measure the impact. We also have a pre and post assessment, so it shows what kind of an impact that we had on student learning. And then partnering with the school leader, that's an important piece. Without admin support, we wouldn't cultivate a place for coaching, and we hope to do that. So Robbie and I meet bi-weekly as much as we can, and have those conversations. So this is what a coaching cycle looks like. Like I said, it's driven by a goal, a standard-based goal, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. This is a full cycle. We find that teachers that take part in full cycles get more, there's more benefit to that for sure. So we have to meet and co-plan once a week. And it's up to them, whatever time they want me to come into their classroom to support them, 1 to 3 times a week of coaching in the classroom. It's all around teacher choice also, which is a big factor. It can occur in groups, pairs, or individuals, and with individuals. And last year I had all various forms of that. Teachers wanted to group with another teacher, and then some teachers just signed up individually for them in the classroom. It can be aligned with any unit of instruction, and like I said, we always start with that pre-test, pre-assessment to see where they're at and where we need to take them, and then our post-assessment guides us into seeing what impact we made. Okay, so the other option that teachers have is to maybe go through a mini cycle. And with the mini coaching cycle, it basically has the same components. We still start with a goal. It's just a shorter time frame is all it narrows down to. So really, when you're looking at a full coaching cycle being looking at a standard, a mini cycle might be a learning target within that standard. Okay, so it's just taking one little piece of that and coming in to support one piece. So the next step I just wanted to share with you, the next several slides, what I did is I just compiled some data from a kindergarten classroom, first grade classroom, and a second grade classroom, just to show a little bit about what went on during those cycles. So this first one happened with 2 kindergarten teachers, and they came to me wondering if I could help them with their curriculum. Their My View curriculum is very rigorous. It's much different than the curriculum we had before. And so one of the big pieces were sight words, and the amount of sight words that kids are being asked to learn now compared to our old curriculum. So they weren't sure how that was going to happen. So in doing some research, I learned about part word mapping and how to teach sight words more effectively. Instead of just flashcards, a lot of the research is pointing to kids learn sight words actually in 3 different areas of the brain. So tapping into the meaning part, the sound part, and the visual, the spelling. So we incorporated this strategy that was research-based into their classroom. And first I'm going to take you to, this is the standard that we worked on, the phonics standard, and this is their success criteria. Once they could do these things, they knew they were successful. So I just want to show you this a little bit. This is the coaching tool that we use to kind of guide our cycle. And what it does, it kind of tells the story of the whole coaching cycle. So we always start with our goal, what practices are we going to try, the teacher, what's the coach going to do, and then after the cycle is done, teachers fill in what they actually did and how their students progressed. So that's the first part of this. At the bottom, it shows the pre and post assessment, so the baseline data. Is that big enough for you to see? Okay. So if you'll see on the left, like we had two classrooms here. Baseline data, classroom A1 and then A2. And you can see that almost all the learners are in the emerging stage of sight word development. And then what we used here was the Unit 1 sight word list. They had 18 words to use, and that's what we used, a checklist. They weren't able to read more than 9 of those words on that list, so they fell in the emerging stage. If you take a look over to the right-hand column, over here you can see how those kids jumped up. So there are no more in the top row. So now these kids have all collectively shifted upward. Okay? And the same down here. So you see a majority of them are actually meeting the standard of reading that unit sight word list. So that was, an effective cycle where they were mostly meeting, but you can see we also had some more work to do. So the other thing that happens during a coaching cycle is if we have kids, and often we do, that haven't met that standard, we always come up with a plan. What do we do next? Because their learning isn't quite done. So teachers were sending sight word lists home with them. They were spiraling back to this more instructional, direct, explicit instruction on win time and centers. And so it continued. So let me go back to the graph here. And this graph shows what took place after the coaching cycle. So I really like this one because it shows teacher buy-in, that it wasn't about, oh, the coach is gone, I'm done doing this. They actually went ahead and went further, and you can tell what their kids, in the beginning of the year, we used what we call a DIBELS assessment, and that's a norm referenced assessment that we use for all our kindergartners. It's a screener. So at the beginning of the year, they were mostly in that developing stage. That same assessment at the end of the year, they were able to extend beyond the standard, a lot of them, and most in meeting the standard. So they had, none of their kids were falling within the developing or intensive stage. So again, this shows teacher buy-in. It shows the impact that these teachers believed in the science, and they worked with this instructional strategy, and it shows in the kids' reading ability. Oh. Grade 1 example. So I'll just go from this chart now. We took the goal of reading accurately and fluently. And a big piece of first grade is putting it all together and learning to read. So we have our learning targets, and the beginning of the coaching cycle, this is the pre-assessment for how many words they were able to read in a minute, and you can see the gaps there. It's quite varied within the grade level. You have some in the intensive part, developing, some were meeting, and then some in the extending part. At the end of the coaching cycle, we assessed again, same assessment, and you can see the fluency has definitely increased. And then another section, another piece of that is the sight words. How many words they can read in 1 minute, sight words. They were developing, meeting, and extending, and that collective shift in the right direction. There's more kids that are there. Here we still have areas to work on with the accuracy. So again, a plan was put in place, and what the teacher could do from there. The next slide is a second grade example. So for this standard, it's a little it's more involved, writing narratives. So you can see when we first started working with this standard in these two classrooms, a lot of the kids were in the emergent stage. They've been introduced to personal narratives, but we're digging deeper every time we go up in a grade level. It spirals back as we go up. So in these two particular classes, you can see again that yes, there was a collective shift in the right direction. However, there's still a good amount of kids that are in that developing stage. And one of the factors, I wanted to show this graph in particular because on the coaching tool, we keep track also of what happened there. And so this shows after our cycle reflections, there's always this piece that we do at the end. And the challenges or missed opportunities, you can see how COVID coming in and out of quarantine, there was a large amount of students that were not there for that instructional teaching. And that's what teachers have been dealing with in the past 3 years. The kids have lost a lot of the explicit direct instruction and therefore, those gaps have gone. So I thought that was a good slide to show, but yes, they made growth, but not to the extent that we would have liked because of a lot of absences and so forth. Any questions about that so far? Comments?
What is the cycle? How long is the cycle?
Well, it depends. A full cycle can last 4 to 6 weeks. And a mini cycle would be 1 to 2 weeks. Last year, I pretty much had all full coaching cycles.
So these are students that would be making progress anyway, right?
Hopefully.
How do you tease out the differential that you would attribute to the coaching program as opposed to whatever they were doing previously?
That's why we do our pre and post assessment within that time.
But you'd expect improvement anyway.
Probably, yeah. So this is a baseline. Last year was a baseline year too. So my hope is to have ongoing data throughout the years that support, the different strategies.
I suppose what we could do too is compare maybe a same grade level that didn't go through a coaching cycle.
Right. Yeah.
Versus one that has.
Yeah.
I think the biggest component about it is, yes, during normal instruction, you would see students making progress. But the beauty of this is that you tease out to the students that are developing and those that have not yet, and you come up with a plan. I'm not saying it always happens, but traditionally, you continue to move forward, and so the gap just continues to widen. And so we did some research with this, and we contacted Bonnie Eagle, who's been doing this model for a really long time. And they said that they started noticing that the strategies that were used were following the students once they found their preferred learning style. And so when they moved to the next year, they'd already have a really good grasp of what the students could learn and that how they learned. And then what they started to see was less referrals to special education because they knew the students' learning style, that it was just much easier for them to target the learning of those students. So,
Just to piggyback on that, so the strategy that we did in the kindergarten class with sight words, there was a lot of talk amongst teachers and the other kindergarten teachers started doing that same strategy. So it's that cumulative effect. And then in first grade as well, teachers are wanting to learn. So it's just a small strategy, but it ripples through and it follows the child, like Sharon says. And more importantly, the teachers get excited. All right, so I do have some teacher testimonials. I'm not going to read through these, but so this, when I asked teachers if they would be willing to say a little bit about their experiences, some of the teachers sent me some testimonials, and you can read them yourselves. But to me, this says a lot. It supports me as a coach, and it just inspires me to want to go in and support them. So they're definitely seeing a difference. And just having that support, that other person in the classroom to have with them and help them meet their kids' needs and put them in place in those gaps.
Can say, having been around teaching now for a little over 20 years, teaching historically has been, I don't want to say competitive, but it's been competitive. And I think especially in the past 3 or 4 years, we're seeing some wonderful collaboration here in Fork Elementary School, where you have team teaching, you have now coaching, you have a lot of teachers willing to partner up and divide the responsibilities in order to, make success with their students, rather than shutting their doors and worrying about just their kids in their classroom. They're really sharing that load. So it's been wonderful to see.
And that goes back to, many of you are familiar with the researcher John Hattie. He has done numerous meta-analysis in the field of what makes the biggest impact, and collector-teacher efficacy. We're all in this together. These are all our kids. We're trying to make a difference with all of them. Is his highest area of impact. So it shows that makes the most growth for kids when we know that we're doing it. And it's not about closing the doors and doing anything. So for personally and professionally, my goals, so to continue to deliver full coaching cycles. I think that's where the biggest impact is. Yes, I can be that coach that provides resources and gives ideas and sits in with planning time, but to really make more of an impact, it's being part of a coaching cycle. Offer professional development for staff. I think we're all learners. Our staff is wonderful. They're eager to learn all the time. So offering that up to staff, continue to do that, and staying current on best practices and always reading and trying to stay up to date. And then I'll continue to gather data and measure impact, and like Mr. Stacey said, show growth over time even more in depth by maybe doing some comparisons. When I come next year, or actually this year, my role has developed into a K-6 role. So now I'm working with more teachers, which I'm very excited about. And I already have teachers that have signed up for full coaching cycles, so I have a full first round, which I'm excited about. My hope is to get in at least 4, maybe 5 rounds. The end of the year gets a little tricky, so with assessments and everything that's going on. But yeah, so I'm really excited to be working in more classrooms and in a wider grade scale. Any other questions or things? Anything else?
I can talk really well to that, so.
I've only been on the school board 6 months or so, ran for school board because I really wanted to see if there was a way for us to ensure that our children, especially our elementary school, achieved at a better rate than they were achieving, which is the most hopeful thing that I've seen.
And the research really shows that this is the best approach, as opposed to teacher observation and going in and making comments about how you teach. You're looking at data, and it's non-threatening to the teacher themselves, and that it really has shown the most growth in student progress is taking this model.
And as far as the differential you were talking about, I love data, and my whole role, I did this all the time. I will say what gets checked gets done. So if you're setting a goal as a teacher or a coach, you're going to check it, you're working collaboratively, your accountability is there, you've identified this area, and that may not necessarily happen without the support of the coach. So I think, yes, there's learning that would occur naturally, but I do, having experienced it, I do think it expedites it, and it really helps the teacher hone in to optimize it and maximize it. So, I mean, that's impressive. I've been making charts like that I've been here since 2009, and those are really, really nice results.
And I should have given credit to Heather because she actually called me the charge. Taking data charge because she is the data queen.
But I have seen the impact, and I'm now MSAD myself. So I know what you were kind of trying to tease out, and I think you probably could by looking at trends over time. But I personally have seen the impact.
Thank you, Kayanne.
Yeah, thank you.
Great information. Thank you very
Should
much.
I just unclip?
Sure.
Item 7, Superintendent.
I just have a few updates. I wanted the board to know that I have been selected to serve on the Maine School, it should say MSSA, it's Maine School Superintendents Association Executive Committee. It's the committee that is represented by one superintendent from all of the counties and all of the regions. I'm representing Aroostook, but it does give me an opportunity to see information even before it comes out. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be in the know about what's happening. I attended my first meeting last Friday, September 9. We got to hear an update from the DOE to cap off the meeting, and then we went through a lot of just housekeeping because it was our first meeting. But I'm optimistic that this opportunity will allow me to come back to you and report out on some things from a statewide level that maybe I wouldn't have had information on, or I would have had secondhand information on, and so that makes me a little bit excited. Just some updates from the DOE. A lot of superintendent agreements across the state. That seems to have picked up quite substantially. On the flip side of that, a lot of homeschool students returning. Locally, we're looking at upwards of 15 to 20, and I'm going to report out on the student data for enrollment next board meeting. So we do have quite a few homeschool students who have returned. So that's good news. They touched on COVID protocols just a bit, that now it's just CDC guidelines according to the plan that I shared with you first school board meeting of the year. The DOE is looking on shifting their focus to the future, focusing on the whole student. That's educating not only academics but also integrating with all of the other needs that students have. And the curriculum focus for the DOE is going to be looking at integrated subjects versus standalone content. They're really looking to make a push to integrate those contents so that schools have more success implementing things like project-based learning and proficiency-based education. So it's just some updates I wanted to share with you. I also have some legislative updates that we'll talk about in 2 agenda items. The second thing I have for you is a DOE Education Workforce Challenge workshop. We have been invited to attend a workshop in Caribou. Mr. Doucette will be joining me, as well as somebody else. Oh, Peter Karen, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't looking at my notes. And Peter Karen, we will be attending that, and that's come at the request of many school districts across the county who are struggling to fill vacancies. We've been very lucky with our professional staff. We still continue to look at some support staff roles that are either being filled and then not being filled. So there definitely is a struggle, but being superintendent of 3 school districts, and one of them which still has 3 professional staff openings for a second year in a row, it's definitely becoming a challenge, and so are the other Aroostook County schools saying the same thing, as well as across the state. We did talk about that during the executive committee, that the DOE is looking to beef up their supports for how we can partner with colleges and universities in order to beef up a workforce. I have some ideas that I would like to share with you at the end of the meeting under new business, so we'll talk more about that. But I will report out to you on what we learned in Caribou when we head over there in a few weeks. And then I did provide you a legislative update just so that you know some of the LDs that have been put in play, or are some resolves that are going on that involve school in some way or shape or form. A lot of these are HR level things, but I do want to be able to provide you some legislative updates when I receive them, and these are some of the newest ones. If you have any questions, I did provide a short summary. And yes, that does say an act to prohibit discrimination in employment based on hair texture and hairstyle. That's not a typo. And you have your administrator reports, and with the exception of Mr. Doucette, who apologizes, but he did have to stay home due to an illness. The rest of your administrators are here to answer any questions you have for them.
I know, I was late.
Any questions for our administrators?
No.
For your reports. Moving on. Items of business, new business.
We have no retirements, no resignations. We do have a resignation, excuse me. You should have a letter from Angela Stravinsky, who has been one of our ed techs at Fort Kent Community High School, Valley Rivers Middle School. She's been a wonderful ed tech for us, but due to some of the things going on where she needs to be home, she has decided to step down in her role, but she will be continuing as a substitute teacher.
We have a motion to accept the resignation. Moved by Sarah, seconded by Shannon. Discussion? All in favor of accepting the resignation? None opposed.
The next two are kind of lumped together because it is a husband-wife combo. You should have a letter from Richard Workman, and he and his wife, Sherry, are moving back to Washington State, and did have an opportunity to overhear Richard talking with some of the central office personnel. This is family related. They moved here to try a new challenge and are moving back because of family. So we're going to be missing two very good ed techs.
Motion to approve the resignations of Richard and Sherry Workman. Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Shannon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
I did provide you with a transfer approval. Josie St. Germain requested a transfer to an ed tech one-on-one vacancy that was vacant. So we did approve that back on August 16th. For new hires, we have a cook helper at CHS VRMS, and you should have a letter from Ms. Melanie Legassi. She's recommending Jessica Ford for the cook helper position at CHS, and this is to replace Tiffany Daigle, who resigned in June.
Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Abigail. Any discussion? All those in favor? None opposed? Motion approved.
We also have a recommendation. You should have a letter from Mr. Coletta and Mr. Doucette. They are recommending Allison Tricarico for an ed tech position at the VRMS. Allison did work for us before, left during the COVID peak, and is now being recommended to go back.
We have a motion? Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Shannon. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion approved.
Another VRMS Ed Tech III, the recommendation letter you have, again, from Mr. Coletta and Ms. Julia Kelly, is for Nicholas Schaefer. Nicholas does have a master's in education, but has yet to really work in the education field, and so he's looking to start that phase in his life, and the recommendations for Nick Schaefer.
Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Abigail. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes.
And we are not going to make the recommendation for the Chippy Center Early Childhood Aid at this time. We did add a new recommendation, and this is for a Fulton Elementary School Ed Tech III one-on-one, and you should have a letter from Mr. Nadeau and Ms. Kelly. They are recommending Jake Lavoie for that position. Jake has recently been working overseas in Japan, teaching some preschool classes. He's originally from Frenchville and is coming back.
We have a motion. Motion made by Abigail, seconded by Shannon. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion approved.
We have this master document list that tracks all of the staff movement from last spring to this point in time. I believe we're on page 3 of that shared document. I believe what we have left for current openings is a Fort Kent Elementary education technician, and we're looking for a 1, 2, or 3 because I believe that is a one-on-one position. That's correct. We're still looking for a VRMS Ed Tech, and I believe that's for the coverage of the gymnasium, the girls' locker room section. So we're looking for a 1, 2, or 3 there as well. And we are currently in the process of looking at vetting the applicants for the district head custodian, and that process is underway. And interviews will be happening soon. And that's to replace Mr. Rudy Martin, who is officially retiring in November.
Item B, Student Council, Gifted in Town to Trip 2022-23.
So I was also asked by Mr. Dorman to let the school board know that our school has 3 representatives on the Maine Association of Student Council Board. That means that we represent all the student councils in Maine, and we are elected by all the students that are in student council. So I was elected vice president, Tia Sose was elected secretary, and Genevieve Verona was elected North representative.
That's enough.
Well done.
So our next student council and gifted talented trip is to New Orleans in November. Last November we went to New York, and that was really fun. So we're going to try it again this November to New Orleans. So some of the stuff we're going to be doing is the Canal Street cemeteries and the Hurricane Katrina memorial tours. That kind of happens in the same area. So we'll be doing that, which will be really fun. The World War II Museum is actually in New Orleans, so we will be getting to see that, along with a Creole-themed paddle wheeler tour. And there was something else that went with this, and I completely forgot what it was. But it was really interesting, something about a battleground tour. We're going to go to the Mardi Gras World Museum tour. This is where all of the previous Mardi Gras parade floats are made and kept. So we'll get to see that, which is really interesting to me. In every city, there's a museum of art, and this is the New Orleans one, so we always go see them. They're always really, really good. We're also going to do the Garden District tour, which I can't wait for that part. It Adventures in New Orleans bus tour. That's the double-decker bus that takes you around the city. You get to see all the attractions. The tour guides are really informational. They're really awesome. I'm most excited for the swamp tour. You go in a little canoe along the swamp, and the crocodiles and all that come right next to you. The Presbytier and the Audubon Aquarium of the Americas.
You guys all sign a waiver before you go.
And Sadie will give a presentation from our Washington, D.C. trip we just took in June.
Yeah. So like Connor said, we went to DC in June. So Nadeau was there. Washington Monument, so those are some pictures from up top. There's the White House and the reflection booth. We went to Mount Vernon to see Washington's house. We got a tour there. We saw Jersey Boys at the Kennedy Center. As a theater person, this is my favorite so far that I have seen. So, the Lincoln Memorial, that's the now senior class of who went. The Capitol Building, picture of the rotunda, that was really cool to see. The picture doesn't do it justice. National Cathedral, MLK Memorial, and World War II Memorial.
Which is funded by Tom Hanks. I don't know, it's a little tidbit we found out when we were there. Yeah.
Lots of memorials. The Washington Nationals baseball game. They did win in the end. It was a close game, but they did win. These are just a few things. The original Star Spangled Banner, and then this is the Korean Memorial, part of the wall. Obviously the White House, Ford's Theater is in the corner up here, and the Hope Diamond. The Holocaust Museum. These are some shoes on the left, and the smell that they had, I'll never forget. You walked in and it like hit you. And then those are pictures. It went all the way to the ceiling, and they had like iPads, so you could like scan the photo and it would tell you their story, which was really cool. Air and Space Museum, National Zoo, Arlington National Cemetery, and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. We got to see the changing of the guards, which was really cool. And this is the dance party we had in front of the White House. It was kind of like a flash mob. It just happened. But lots of memories were made, and it was an awesome time. That's all.
So, board members, every year, Mr. Dorman partners with Ms. Jamie Pelletier. They take a student council GT trip. That's usually in the fall, and that's the trip that Connor just presented to you. And then in the spring, they'll take a travel club, a U.S. City travel club, and that's what Sadie just reported back to you on last
This
year.
spring is LA. We're going to Los Angeles.
Right, so there will be a presentation on LA before they go to LA so that the board can see their plans. And I've been to the LA trip, and it's fantastic, except for the flight. It's really long. What we look for is just getting the board to ask questions about these trips and then ultimately approve. So tonight you would be approving the fall trip to New Orleans if you approve.
Since this is a gifted and talented student council trip, how is it funded as opposed to, the spring trip where each student pays their own way?
Yep.
It's paid.
So what do you guys have to pay a share of the trip?
So normally Miss Jamie in the Gifted and Talented program pays for the entirety of the trip, and we just pay our meals and whatever we do for shopping. But this time, because costs are so expensive, we pay our plane tickets.
Yeah. So when Miss Jamie builds her GT budget, she factors in the cost for that year's trip, and that is part of that. Mr. Dorman, you came right at the right time.
You may or may not have missed it.
That is part of that that is part of her grant request. And then, like Connor said, this year costs are more, especially flights and lodging. So the students are footing part.
And that covers the student council as well as the GT.
Correct. Yep.
Student council, it's only seniors and juniors that are going, and then the full gifted.
How many students in all?
22.
Thank you.
It's a good thing.
I would just point out there's a strong cultural connection between New Orleans and the St. John Valley. You might, just in preparing for this thing, contact Patrick Lacroix at the archives and ask him for a presentation, particularly about Mardi Gras, but perhaps other connections, direct connections between New Orleans and Lafayette, places like that, and Madawaska or Kent. Because it's remarkable.
Mr. Daigle has done a ton of work on that too. When I was in high school and we were having a big Acadian festival, I think he went through the entire school.
He still does it.
Yeah, he had gone through the entire school and found your connections to everyone from Celine Dion to, he had it all. So he would be a good person to give a presentation on that too.
Very good. So we need a motion to approve the fall trip to Los Angeles.
Nope.
Oh, New Orleans. Sorry, New Orleans.
Yes.
So moved.
Motion made by Shannon, seconded by Abigail. Any discussion, further discussion?
Do you need a chaperone? Sounds fun. But no other discussion.
Very good. All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Stay away from the alligators.
Can't promise anything.
Stay in your canoe less drinking. Okay.
The student handbooks.
FKES, CHS, VRMS Student Handbook Approval.
What I did ask each administrator to do this spring is to go over their handbooks, organize in a way that's what we tend to do with handbooks is just add on, and not reorganize. And I think both administrative teams have done a good job streamlining and organizing it in a thoughtful manner. These are shared digitally, correct, with the student learners. Hard copies are not given, and that's because they're up to date all the time. So there is a small change when the learner or the parent clicks on the link, they'll see the live up-to-date version. So your version may already be outdated, but chances are not. But we do like to have the board members see them and approve them if you so wish.
Sorry to read that. There was just a couple of things that I noticed that were just either copied twice or something. The other thing that I would recommend is on the high school and middle school one, there is the page of all the contacts and that would be kind of cool to have as well. Like it had the numbers, phone numbers, contact information, teachers and stuff. That would be kind of good. I would love to.
That was just the elementary school.
Yeah.
Table at the next meeting.
You can approve with.
Yeah,
Okay.
if they're not lecturing.
Recommended changes. Very good. Does anybody have any other questions as far as
At the end of the learner's handbook, it has an acknowledgement that they've actually read this and understand the rules and expectations. Do you really believe anyone reads this stuff? Yeah. I mean, if you actually took them through it. But my concern is that we do this more and more in our society. You go to the credit union and sign stuff on your pad, you don't even know what you're signing. You do that at the doctor's office. You do that in all areas now. You sign stuff with software licenses and everything. wonder at some point why we don't sit up and say, you know, this is not realistic. Maybe we should be realistic and be honest with each other about. So in other words, if you actually expect students to read this with their parents, then you have to set up a program where you actually do that. Or if you don't expect them to do it, then we define this differently or set a different expectation regarding how this is deployed. My suspicion is that it's probably deployed as a handbook when something goes wrong and people are looking for a policy. So something bad happened and there's disagreement. So someone says, well, let's go down here on page 17, here's what it says. Okay, so it establishes an expectation in writing, even though it hasn't been, not speculative, but even though it hasn't been laborious and rules everything else. I think that's a much more honest way of dealing with the reality. But I throw that out there.
No, Dave, you bring up a great point. Just speaking on my own experience, I know for a fact my youngest son, we went through the middle school, high school handbook. But did I give a second thought with my oldest? He's in 10th grade this year. We've gone through this before. Maybe if we had a list of highlighted changes from one year to the next. I think for myself, as far as going through the handbook every year and as a board member, I mean, it's pretty much boilerplate material, right? It's one year to the next, it's always, for the most part, the same. I want to know what the changes are. As far as approving this, one year to the next.
I think that's the high school, middle school one has the red or whatever changed this year.
We also have students that overtime teachers as well, especially highlighted changes.
Yeah, I think we can definitely make an effort to have the students familiar with parents. I don't know how we're going to get them there. Maybe something on social media. We'll have to think about that. But you're right, Dave. That acknowledgement page is for us to be able to come back and say, you signed this.
Yeah, isn't that frustrating for all of us?
Yeah.
When you sign the waiver of liability and all these other things, and then when something really egregious happens, you say, hey, you can't say a thing, you just sign. And so much of our business world today is built on that kind of deception that it'd be nice to break away from it just a little bit.
Maybe piggybacking on what Mr. Coletta said, if a class goes through it with their warrior time, maybe we can have the students sign off and then take it home and say, Mom and Dad, I signed this because we went over it in school. Now I need you to sign.
Realistically, I think if you're going to have somebody wade through something like this, you've got to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
You can't ask them to sit down and read this in a setting.
Although I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have.
Pardon me?
I'm sure you have gone over it.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the 2022-23 handbooks for FKES, CHS, VRMS with Sarah's recommended changes? Corrections?
No, just
Moved by Abigail, seconded by Ms. Tanya. Any further discussion?
I have a question about the safe address stuff. The hats and hoods. Can you tell me why there's no hats and hoods?
Our policy says so.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not gonna.
I think a lot of it was going back to indoors, so some of it was tradition, I think. And years ago was so that changed it so that you can have hats and hoods in the school, always when you're in class, take them off. Shows the teacher.
say that working with 3 school units, it's from one extreme to the other in the 3 units, and when they go to the tech center, the melting pot, it's extremely challenging. As Mr. Coletta said, we here at SAD 27 look at making concessions. So you can wear those, so you can use your cell phone in the hallway. So there are concessions we make, but in the classroom, it's learning time, respect, and try to use that. Other schools, it's 0 tolerance, it's 0, so it's challenging. It's how to make it work. But it is policy.
I did appreciate in the high school version, and maybe it's just not needed in the elementary school version, very descriptive of, okay, this is exactly what's going to be covered as far as, instead of just saying, like it was private areas and the torso and all your undergarment, like these are the visitor expectations. There's no room for
No gray area.
yeah, no gray. This is what's going to be covered, and that's that.
Anyone else have anything that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion approved. Item D, new strategies for filling remaining vacancies.
And this is more brainstorming with you than actually looking to implement things. Like I mentioned earlier, we're in relatively good place, but given what a lot of neighboring school districts are facing and what I'm hearing across the county and the state and also nationally, and also looking at our current workforce, the general age of our staff and pending retirements or retirements on the horizon. I'm just trying to get your thoughts on what future recruitment might look like or can look like. And so I put a few ideas. None of these are brand new, but I did want to at least get your sense for where you think these type of things have a place in SAD 27. The first one is a sign-on bonus. And I do add that if this is to be implemented, we need to have an idea of what would be an affordable bonus and what the commitment expectation of the employee would be. So if we were to implement some kind of sign-on bonus because we're looking for this teaching position that we just can't fill, are we asking them to commit X amount of years to SAD 27 as part of that? Are we providing that sign-on bonus all up front, or this much up front, this much mid-year? So those type of things. And we also have to also discuss the fact that there are current employees that never got a sign-on bonus, which may be an issue as well. What are your thoughts on sign-on bonuses?
I think if there is going to be a sign-on bonus, it should be for an X amount of years, commitment-wise.
Yep.
There should be a commitment of, I don't know, depending on the size of the bonus,
Yeah.
$1,000, then a year, or I don't know what would be realistic. but-
Right. That way they're not just with us for a year and then they're gone.
Exactly. And then in fairness to teachers who never got that opportunity, you know.
We would also maybe recommend only having it one position has been open for a long enough time to make it meaningful.
After renegotiation, I think there's definitely some pushback to offer bonuses. And I just don't know what would be, like, it's not like we can give every person that's continuing working a bonus, a comparable bonus. So I don't know how we would offer that without.
I think it would be a super slippery slope.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can
Okay.
I know some people offer, so if you're looking at your current employees, what might be an option is offering incentive for recruitment. So if you're a teacher and you're able to they stay and sign on and get, I know a lot of schools do that.
That's a great segue to my second idea.
Not quite there yet.
Really, I read it, I was just.
No,
We're trying to save the best for last.
Yeah. And we'll just lump that. The second one is what Sharon just mentioned. It's an employee referral bonus. So essentially, you know, if you've recommended so-and-so, they've applied and they've been hired, or maybe there's a small incentive for getting applicants, a bigger incentive for actually referring somebody who ultimately got hired. Maybe that's something that's more palatable. I know that when we've had some vacancies and I've shared it with staff and said, please share this on your social media pages, we seem to get 1 or 2 applicants like within 24 hours. So there's some power to that. But if there's also a little bit of money tied to that, it might give somebody more incentive to reach out to the sister-in-law that, you know, works in this field in Westbrook, or the brother-in-law, you know, so something like that. Thoughts about that?
Well, I guess my concern is which positions are eligible for the referral bonus. Do we have positions where we don't have a hard time filling? Which I imagine all of our positions are kind of.
I can say that.
I mean, unlike bus driver position, we know that's probably one of the hardest ones to fill. Right?
It is. We also have a lot of turnover in the kitchen. We have a lot of ed tech turnover. And then we've gone from, you know, pools of teacher candidates being anywhere from 5 to 10 to now being 1 to 2 or 3. You know, we saw a large pool with our music teacher position. We had 4 applicants, and that was like, wow. So we're not seeing huge pools of candidates.
Getting back to the sign-on bonuses, I'd just like to echo what everybody else seemed to be saying is I don't know how we offer up sign-on bonuses, you know, when we've got employees in the district who've been here all along, through thick and thin, especially over the past few years. I think there's another way to structure that, maybe something in the form of maybe a payment towards somebody's student loans, or something to help encourage those fresh out of college with a teaching degree. Maybe help offset some of the loans they may have. I don't know, that's just something to think of that's maybe outside the box.
Do we offer some sort of like assistance for getting their masters?
Only once they're hired.
Once they're
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of a countercultural thought. We try to reduce everything to money, and everything's transaction. You pay. There are a few areas of work where that is maybe not still the dominating force. And if I were to pick one, I'd say teachers. We used to think healthcare was one. We've had a rough time. But teaching still is a place where it strikes me anyway that so many people choose to become teachers, not because it pays great, but because they're really turned on by working with young people. And so anything that we can do to support them in their teaching, like for instance, working on the hybrid program, but also giving them support to help them to teach and to do what they love, as opposed to simply throwing money at them, strikes me as building on that culture. And it's worth building on that culture to the extent that we still have that culture, I think. And then, of course, there ought to be really big concern about, are they making a living? You know, are they getting enough to feed their families and to have the basics that they need to be happy in their work, which is a critical thing. So, to the extent that their proposals propose one-time bonuses or extra money, I wonder how effective they would be with the type of teaching we really want. But on the other hand, the type of proposal that offers them encouragement and support in their work in a variety of other ways might be perfect.
One thing that we've had to do, and we've been very successful with, especially the past 2 or 3 years, is recruiting non-traditional teachers. So these are people who have not come through a teacher preparation course. They went to college for something else, they got a degree, but then they got turned on to teaching because they worked as a secretary or an ed tech in felt like that was their calling. And we've worked with these individuals, and we have quite a few now that have earned their certification through a non-traditional pathway. So I'm happy that we've done that. But we definitely, you know, we're seeing some challenging times, especially when the colleges are not recruiting future teachers quite a bit. And maybe, and I'm just skipping, maybe our goal in that is skipping to number 4. Maybe we need to start investing in our graduates here from CHS and saying, hey, if you go to school to become a teacher, here's an incentive that we have for you to come back and work for us. So maybe that's hopefully we can.
There's quite a few recent graduates in school right now for education.
Well, and if you've got a student from CHS who's interested in staying in the Valley and looking to do that, you know, there's a really neat program. The UMFK and LP have that 2 and 2 now.
Yep.
So they can stay the additional 2 years right here before Canada happens. You know, there's some scholarship money available for that. And then they go to LP for the second 2 years. You know, it just gives them that opportunity to stay here in the Valley and make a living. Right?
I'd love to see that sort of information on a LinkedIn page for our school district. Because I think as far as a professional, career-based resource or social media platform, LinkedIn's a pretty good resource for that. And you know, that sort of selling point, along with our coaching efforts that we were just presented with, I think are great selling points for our district. And for a new teacher knowing that they can come into a district and we have the resources to help them get started and get on their feet.
Piggybacking on what you said, Dave, too, about teaching not being something you go into to become a millionaire. I don't know what you all offer already, and you've got a gym right here at the high school. Do your staff, are they able to go for free? You know, can you set something up with the ski tower or with 10th Mountain where that self-care can come into place, where if you're I think maybe you get them a Northwoods pass. Maybe there's some sort of incentive like that, so that, okay, we recognize that you are giving absolutely everything in the classroom, and we want to support you, you know, on your weekends. You get to do some of these other things, or
Community incentives.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
With COVID lifting and pretty much behind us, do we ever go out to job fairs? Are there ever opportunities for us to present or be at a job fair outside of or in a college community where they have teaching degrees?
I haven't heard of job fairs in such a long time.
They do still have them. They do. I used to present with them a lot for AHC. Usually, like, we will do one right at the beginning, and you know, there's mostly the colleges.
So right now, I think the low-hanging fruit is social media, a social media presence that anybody interested in the area, they can come back and see that our school district, number one, is on social media and active. And I don't know how or who does it.
social media is a really powerful tool too. You know, like, I mean, it's been a few years, but I spent some time just subbing here. The way that the teachers support each other, and you see it on, like, friends with a lot of the teachers on Facebook, right? The people that are there commenting on each other's things and the support that you see them giving each other, not just for school. I can only imagine this is a really supportive place to work just based on these friendships that seem to have formed at work. If there was a way to tap into that and show that piece when you have a job opening, like, listen, you want to work here. Your next best friend is going to be here.
Yeah, and I think I had shared with you when an applicant does apply, we send a letter out thanking them for applying, and it gives them links where they can go to the YouTube pages where it has videos from some of our teachers. Some real good feedback with that. They feel like they get to know some of our staff, but maybe taking that a step further, and that's a good idea.
When we have 3 or 4 applicants for a teaching position, those, let's say, 3 people that don't get the position, do we provide them with other openings in the district as well?
So let's say in a perfect world we have 10 applicants, 5 are interviewed, 5 do not. The protocol for that is the 5 that are not, after the position is filled, they get a thank you letter for applying, and you'll keep your file on, your application on file for 3 years. Those that are interviewed, the ones that are not selected, get a personal call from the lead administrator thanking them. A lot of times they will steer them in the direction of a new opening, if we have some. If we have 2 teacher openings though, a lot of times what the interview committee will do is say, we would like to recommend this teacher for this position and this one for that, so that when we're calling them, we're telling them, you didn't get the 2nd grade, but we have a 3rd grade opening, would you like that? That happens as well. And I will be honest, a lot of times we're also saying, did you know that we don't have any positions left, but Dr. LeBac Elementary School is looking for, and maybe you're interested there, or Madawaska Elementary, so we do that as well. The only one we didn't talk about is hybrid work. How does the board feel about filling positions? And we don't really have any right now, but filling positions in the future that may be possible as hybrid work, where the staff member could work sometime from home and sometime on site. It really doesn't lend to some positions. Obviously, a bus driver can't be giving you hybrid work. We really don't want our teachers to have hybrid work as an option. We have hybrid work as a possibility in the event that we need to do that, and we're prepared for that. But there are some functions that, you know, maybe a central office personnel that, you know, can do essential job functions from home and at the job site. What are your thoughts about that, or would you like to keep it same for all, no matter what? And the reason I ask this is the Department of Education just did report out that their new policy on work is going to be a large majority of their employees being hybrid, a very small percentage going back to the job site. And it kind of got me thinking about, you know, is that the type of employee that we're going to be attracting in the future, is somebody that has that flexibility?
I can tell you as a child care provider that I have so many calls of moms and people wanting to go back to work, and there's not enough child care. So that might be an option to help, you know, those who want to get back to work but can only find part-time or limited days. So it might make it easier for people who want to get back into the workforce.
I think that's the idea. I worked hybrid for MHC for quite a few years with COVID, and then as we were coming out of COVID, they kind of offered those hybrid plans where, you know, you could go into the office 2 days a week, work from home 3 days a week, and it's a really slippery slope, because if you let one central office person work from home part-time, well then the next one might, and then I think it became hard to keep track of employees too. For AMHC, that was the biggest issue they had, and they ended up bringing a lot of positions back to the office, because as much as you put on a calendar, okay, I'll be in, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, work from home Tuesday, Thursday, well then your daughter has a doctor's appointment that day, so you switch your hybrid day, so then you might have planned to, you know, pop in and see someone that day, but they're not there anymore. And I think it just is hard to keep track, and I know that our direct supervisors here are already, you know, put under a lot of stress and have a lot of responsibility, and I would hate to see them trying to track down employees all day long.
Yeah. What about hybrid work just for the superintendent? I do not want hybrid work, trust me. I think it's conversations we're going to need to continue to have. Like I said, I'm not looking for answers today because we're not in a pinch today. But when we're going to the negotiation table, when we're talking about vacancies that we've posted for a year now that we're not filling, we may want to revisit some of this and say, okay, what is it we want to try now? Because what we're trying is not working. In the meantime, I like some of the non-monetary examples we have, although it will cost you know, a little bit in some way. If we can do some community incentives, that would be, I think, something that I think would just be a bonus for the community in partnership with the schools. I think making sure that on our applications we really highlight the fact that We have a university that has a partnership with a neighboring university that can make achieving your education goals more possible. So doing some things like that, I think, is definitely a good start. Other thoughts?
Good discussion. Very good. All right. So Ben, what are your thoughts as far as reporting back to the board, or you gonna?
On this item?
Yeah, sort of progress.
What I'd like to do is speak with the admin team about some of the ideas that they may have, maybe brainstorm some priorities of things that we think we should try. Obviously, I'll take what Dave was saying. Money's good, but people really don't get in the education gig for money. So maybe the employee incentive thing might get people a little bit juiced up to make some referrals, so maybe that might be one of them. But I'd like to see what the admin team has for examples and present something a little more formal to you.
Sure. Sounds good. Okay, item E, Fort Kayanne Elementary School tour.
For those of you who haven't been in this building in a while, or maybe have been a couple years ago, wow, this building is amazing. What the work that has gone into it from top to bottom. I think it would be wonderful if you have a few minutes to walk around with us and hear about some of the improvements we've made, and just take a look at everything from paint to flooring to wax to shiny doorknobs and everything in between. It's just really amazing. And I will defer to Mr. Nadeau to be our tour guide.
Will be similar to the Capitol building tour.
But if the board would probably adjourn at this point, that way we don't have to come back.